Okay, acquisition strategies. One of the key areas that a CISO or senior security person in an organization, one of their key responsibilities is defining or helping define how that organization acquires stuff. Hardware, software, whatever the case may be. The acquisition strategy helps that organization define how that material is brought into the organization and what happens to it once it's processed into the organization. The acquisition strategy is meant to define how to acquire, again, stuff, whatever that might be, hardware, software, computers, anything. It is one step in the system development lifecycle, or SDLC. You can see the 5 phases of the SDLC, starting with initiation, and then acquisition and development, implementation, operation, and then disposition. One of the reasons an acquisition strategy is so important is because of its position in that list. It's one of the one of the first things an organization does as it processes new equipment or new material into the organization. This should be in line with other strategies or other organizational strategies that you might have. You don't want any disconnects between what the organization is buying and what it's operating, let's say. And this acquisition strategy document should provide a list of the roles and responsibilities, milestones, the key processes, key guidance that somebody would need to be able to process material, software, again, that stuff coming into the organization. The point of the strategy document is to establish a common understanding between everybody who's buying stuff, maintaining stuff, operating stuff. Again, and this acquisition policy or acquisition strategy should be documented and repeatable. You don't want to have different rules apply to different people in an organization as they're bringing things into the organization. One of the key areas that gets forgotten about quite a bit in these acquisition strategies is legacy systems. These are systems that you have you've had in your organization for 5 years, 10 years, maybe even 30 years. All of this older systems that you have. And so your acquisition strategy should account for the fact that you have to maintain this old stuff. When are you going to replace it? How do you continue buying parts for it? Whatever the case may be there. But don't forget about the legacy systems as you're going through your acquisition strategy and defining what that strategy should be. And then another major area of the document is to describe the key roles and responsibilities. There are a lot of stakeholders involved in the acquisition process, from purchasing agents to maintainers, the inventory people, lots of different stakeholders in this. But this document serves as a guide for them so that they know what's my role, what's my responsibility in terms of bringing all this stuff into the organization. One of the key aspects of this is to involve security personnel early in the process. You want to make sure that as you're bringing this stuff into your organization, that security requirements are baked into it. Make sure one of your security staff is on the acquisition strategy, the document development involved in that process of not only creating this document, but of running the process itself. That'll make sure that your security requirements are actually involved in the acquisition process. And the strategy itself, again, should include both processes and guidance. So the process standpoint, it should help people understand what do I need to do in terms of purchasing stuff. All right, who's responsible for purchasing it? Who's responsible for doing the inventory on it? Who does the maintenance of it? And how do we, or who's responsible for the life cycle management of it? So again, as we bring this stuff into our organization, who's doing what, when are they doing it, and why are they doing it? It should also offer some guidance on where to go in terms of vendors, suppliers. Do I have an approved vendor list? Why do I have an approved vendor list? Well, maybe I'm only supposed to use company X, Y, and Z because we have purchasing agreements with them and they give us discounts or something to that effect. But there are approved vendors and suppliers. Source selection. So if I've got to bid out the process or bid out the whatever it is that I'm purchasing, your acquisition strategy should define what that process looks like. Do I have to get 3 bids from different vendors? How do I do that selection? And that sort of thing. And you might also take a look at minimum security requirements from your vendors as well. We saw quite a while ago, probably 2003, 2004, Department of Defense started doing a IPv6 transition, right? And they said if you're going to go out and buy hardware, routers, switches, firewalls, whatever the case may be, it has to be IPv6 ready. And that was the part of the acquisition strategy is we're going to adopt IPv6. In order to do that over the course of 3, 5, 7 years, whatever it was, we're going to start buying IPv6 ready stuff. And then the last point here is that it should be, again, compliant with the overall either Chief Information Security Officer or CIO security strategy. Again, you don't want to go buy stuff that has security vulnerabilities in it, that has issues that's going to be, or it's not going to operate on your network. You don't want to have any of those kinds of issues. So make sure that your acquisition strategy is in complete agreement with whatever policies and strategies you have elsewhere. Anything that you buy should be secure. And I know that's a difficult, it's easy to say, but it's very difficult in practice to do. If you look at some of the risks out there of things that you're buying, software that you buy might have undisclosed vulnerabilities in it. The things you buy, routers, picture frames, those electronic picture frames. There's a good case study from Sony a few years ago that had malicious code in it. The whole supply chain concept, you need to make sure that is as secure as possible. And so part of your acquisition strategy has to include proper planning on how do I deal with the supply chain? How do I make sure that the stuff that I'm getting in is at least meets some minimum level of security? And I do that through a needs assessment. What do I need from a security standpoint? I'm defining my security requirements. And then I go out and do an initial risk assessment of the vendor itself and whatever it is that I'm buying from the vendor to make sure that it's going to meet my needs determination or my risk assessment that I just did. And then I can figure out, all right, if that's not going to work, what are my other options? What other hardware, what other software can I buy? Are there things that I can do once I get that stuff into my organization? Do I need to do code reviews on it? Do I need to do firmware, checksums on it to make sure that what I'm getting is actually what I bought and hasn't been altered anywhere in that chain? The minimum security requirements, again, these are things that you want to look at for protecting confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the stuff that you're, not only of the stuff you're bringing in, but the stuff you currently have. So if you look at basic protections for this, it might be making sure that the stuff you're getting has updated antivirus protection. You might consider things like multi-factor authentication, all sorts of things that you can do to look at, all right, what am I getting as part of my acquisition process? And does it meet my security requirements? This is one of the reasons why it's so important to have a security person involved in this process, is they can speak to those individual requirements and they can say, this product has to do this, it has to do that, and my security requirements are now baked into my stuff as it comes into the organization. And all of this stuff is usually dictated through use of contracts or service level agreements and that sort of thing. And so it's important that as you're buying things, you make sure that your security requirements are involved or actually listed in that contract. There are several types of contract vehicles, and it's all part of a what you should consider part of third-party assessment, third-party management, vendor management, and making sure that the stuff you're getting is from approved vendors. They're doing their own due diligence on taking care of your information and providing you products that are secure. And so vendor management is this idea that I'm going to buy something from Jane. I'm going to make sure that Jane has information security practices so that when I send her my billing, credit card information, it's not going to get compromised and stolen. And that's the gist of a vendor management program. You can actually execute on that through things like service level agreements, contractual agreements, but these are the documents that you put in place, the agreements you put in place to make sure that what you're buying is what you think you're buying, or you're getting what you think you're buying, and that any part of that transaction, credit card details, personal information, whatever the case may be, is all secure. So part of the vendor management program requires that you document how you interact with that vendor and the requirements of that. So again, it's repeatable. You don't want to have vendor Jane be different from vendor Bob. You want to treat them the same in terms of security requirements. And then it's important to go back through and revisit this entire process, not only the vendor management, but your entire acquisition strategy every quarter, every year, as you're going through things to make sure that the new set of security requirements or the things that you just learned over the last year are being accounted for.